Right now, there's something in your kitchen that humans have killed for, fought wars over, taxed until it started revolutions, carried across deserts on the backs of camels, 1,000 miles at a time. It's white, it's cheap, it's sitting in a shaker on your table, and for most of human history, it was worth more than the gold sitting next to it. This is the hidden story of salt. To understand why, go back before agriculture, before cities, before humans figured out how to preserve food. The human body cannot make sodium. Without it, the nervous system fails, muscles cramp, the heart struggles. Early humans didn't know the science. They just knew some foods made them feel strong, and without them, they felt weak. So evolution built a craving, not a preference, a survival mechanism, the same kind that pulls you toward sugar or fat. Hunter-gatherers got sodium from meat, but once humans started farming, once diets shifted to grains and vegetables, that source disappeared. Farming created a need, and that need turned a mineral into one of the most valuable substances on Earth. Archaeological evidence suggests organized salt production goes back at least 8,000 years, with some of the earliest known sites found in modern-day Romania, where Neolithic people boiled brine over fires to extract solid salt. This wasn't seasoning. This was survival infrastructure, and once salt could be produced in one place and needed in another, you had something new in human history, a resource worth moving. Roads got built for it. Trade routes formed around it. But before we get to trade, here's how seriously ancient civilizations treated this mineral. When ancient armies wanted to make absolutely sure a conquered city could never rise again, some destroyed more than its walls. According to ancient accounts, including the story told about Rome's destruction of Carthage, victorious armies would salt the earth of a defeated city, spreading it across the farmland so nothing would grow there again. Historians debate how often this actually happened versus how often it was symbolic legend. But the fact that salt shows up in that story at all tells you something. This wasn't just food. It was powerful enough that destroying a civilization's access to fertile, salt-free land was considered a fitting final blow. A mineral that could keep you alive could also be turned into a weapon against an entire city. But salt's power wasn't only about war. It was about winter. Before refrigeration, meat and fish rotted within days. Entire communities lived one bad harvest away from starvation. Salt changed that. Packed into meat and fish, it pulled out moisture and stopped bacteria in its tracks, turning food that would spoil in a week into food that could last for months. Viking sailors carried salted fish on their longships. Medieval villages salted their autumn slaughter to survive winters with no other food source. For most of human history, the difference between a family that starved and a family that didn't often came down to how much salt they had access to. That's the part people forget. Salt wasn't just currency, and it wasn't just a weapon. It was the technology that let humans outlast the seasons. Nowhere does the value of salt show up more dramatically than in the Sahara. For centuries, massive slabs of salt were cut from mines deep in the desert, places like Tagaza, in modern-day Mali, and loaded onto camel caravans stretching for miles. These caravans crossed some of the harshest terrain on the planet to reach Timbuktu, where salt was traded for something almost as valuable: gold. At times, according to historical accounts from Arab traders and scholars, salt was traded pound for pound against gold dust, not because salt was rare everywhere, but because in the deep interior of West Africa, far from any coast or mine, it was almost impossible to get. Timbuktu became one of the wealthiest trading cities in the medieval world. Built on a simple exchange, a mineral one region had too much of, for a mineral another region had too much of. Salt didn't just get traded there, it built a city. In ancient Rome, one of the empire's most important roads, the Via Salaria, the Salt Road, was built specifically to move salt from coastal salt works inland. There's a popular story that Roman soldiers were literally paid in salt, which is supposedly where the word salary comes from. Most historians see that as an oversimplification. Soldiers were paid in coin, but the word salarium did refer to a salt allowance tied to salt's value. The connection was real enough to survive permanently in the language. Every time someone says earning a salary, they're echoing a mineral that once decided whether a soldier could afford to eat. But not every chapter of salt's history is about trade. Some of it is about control. Once a government realizes people cannot survive without something, it has a choice: let people access it freely or turn it into a tool of power. In China, salt production became a state monopoly as early as the 7th century BC, and for centuries the salt tax was one of the largest sources of revenue any Chinese dynasty had. France took it further. Starting in the 14th century, the French crown imposed the gabelle, a mandatory salt tax that forced every household above a certain age to buy a fixed amount of salt from state-controlled stores at government-set prices, whether they needed it or not. The tax was so despised that it created something else, an entire underground economy of salt smugglers, known as faux sauniers, who risked galley slavery or execution to move untaxed salt across French borders. In some regions, smuggling salt wasn't a fringe crime. It was a way of life passed down through families, a quiet rebellion against a law everyone hated but couldn't avoid. By the time the French Revolution arrived, the gabelle had become one of the clearest symbols of royal excess in the country. Historians point to it as one of the grievances that helped fuel the anger that brought down the monarchy. A tax on the one mineral every human body requires helped push a kingdom toward collapse. And salt's political power didn't stop in the 18th century. In 1930, under British colonial rule, salt production and sale in India were tightly controlled, and Indians were taxed on salt even though the country bordered an ocean full of it. Mahatma Gandhi responded by walking 240 miles to the sea over 24 days in what became known as the Salt March. When he arrived at the coast, he broke the law in the simplest way possible. He picked up a handful of natural salt from the seabed. That single act, reclaiming a mineral the human body cannot live without, became one of the most powerful symbols of resistance in the movement toward Indian independence. Not a battle, not a weapon. Salt. By the 19th and 20th centuries, industrial mining and refrigeration changed everything. Salt became cheap, abundant, and easy to produce at massive scale. The mineral that once determined trade routes, funded empires, and helped topple a monarchy became something you can buy for pennies at any store on earth. But the craving never left. It's still wired into you, exactly the way it was wired into humans 8,000 years ago, boiling brine over a fire. That instinct once kept people alive. Now it just knows salt tastes good. It doesn't know salt is no longer scarce. In a world where it's in nearly everything we eat, that ancient survival mechanism has become a real public health challenge tied to rates of high blood pressure and heart disease worldwide. The same drive that once sent camels across the Sahara now just sends you back for one more handful of fries. So, the next time you reach for the salt shaker, you're touching something that built roads through Rome, turned Timbuktu into a city of gold, and helped tax a monarchy into revolution. Something a man once carried in his hand at the edge of an ocean, to help end an empire's grip on a nation. All of that in a small white crystal you probably never think about. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden history behind something this ordinary, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Every week, we dig up the forgotten stories behind the things you use without ever asking why. Because sometimes the biggest turning points in history aren't in a museum. They're sitting right there on your dinner table.